I would like to welcome our panelists. Thank you for joining us this evening and participating in this event. We really appreciate your time. I'm first going to read the bios that are in the programs. First, Diana Boutou, who joined us from Palestine, just joined us, came in from Haifa, Palestinian and Canadian human rights lawyer, analyst, and writer based in Haifa. Previously served as a lawyer to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, an advisor to President Mahmoud Abbas and Palestinian negotiators. Diana is also a writer and works with the Institute for Middle East Understanding, IMEU. Miko Peled, thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. to Italy to Switzerland, and next Belgium. Thank you, Miko. Writer and human rights activist born and raised in Jerusalem, prominent supporter of the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, and the creation of a single democracy with equal rights on all of historic Palestine. Lina Hadid, thank you for joining us from Paris, lawyer, lobbyist, and activist for the Palestinian Liberation Movement based between Geneva and Paris, one of the founders of the Palestine Lobby. She uses her social media presence to raise awareness for Palestinian human rights. Anne-Catherine Mentre, ça va, my French, I'm sorry, Anne-Catherine, member of the Swiss Parliament for Vaud from 1999 to 2007, author of 10 motions concerning the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories and the role of Switzerland. She joined a delegation of Swiss parliamentarians in the West Bank in 2002, and again in 2007 to meet Israeli Palestinians. She was a member of the Parliamentarian Legal Affairs Committee, which modified the law to allow the indictment of perpetrators of war crimes. Philip Luther, thank you for joining us from London. Philip has worked for Amnesty International for over 20 years. He is currently the Senior Research and Policy Advisor, managing the production of the organization's annual report, formerly Research and Advocacy Director for the Middle East and North Africa in 2015-2020, Director of the Middle East and North Africa Program, 2011-2015, and graduated from Oxford University in Arabic and Modern Hebrew. So thank you. For our opening discussion, please help yourselves to some water because we will demand a lot of attention and a lot of speaking from you. But we will ask each panelist an opening question, and each panelist will be given 5 to 7 minutes to expand on the overarching topic of the apartheid via their personal insights and lived experiences. Our goal is to look at the apartheid through a historical narrative, the present-day situation, and finally, what can be done next. So Philip, we'll start with you. As a member of the Amnesty team that helped create this report, Palestinians have, for more than 20 years, asserted that they are living under an apartheid regime. In addition, other human rights organizations such as B'Tselem and the Human Rights Watch have also called Israel's practices apartheid. If you could please explain the inner workings of this specific report, its summary findings, how it's different from other reports, and finally, why now?
Thanks very much indeed, Henny. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I mean, it's very difficult to follow those. Ça marche pas? Does this work? Okay, this works? Okay, thank you. And thanks, Hani. I was saying that it's difficult to follow those very moving films. I mean, in a way, the intense and prolonged cruelty that we saw by the actions of one state against a whole people is, I guess, what we're trying to sum up and explain in Amnesty's report. And others have tried to do the same, of course, in other publications. I mean, the Amnesty report was a report that was 4 years of research and analysis in the making. We began by, first of all, trying to understand properly what the definition of apartheid is and set that out. Because apartheid is both a system and a crime. It's a system in the sense of an institutionalized regime of oppression and domination by one racial group against another through laws, policies, practices, the practices we were seeing. But it's also a crime. The crime of apartheid are also the human rights violations, the severe human rights violations that serve to create and maintain that system. We looked in the production of the report at the Israeli state's intentions to control the Palestinian population through the statements of Israeli officials themselves over successive administrations, and their statements that their objective is Jewish demographic hegemony. And we looked and researched at 4 strategies that we believe the Israeli state undertakes in order to affect that oppression and domination. So territorial fragmentation of Palestinians, segregation and control of Palestinians, the dispossession of Palestinians' land and property, and the deprivation of their economic and social rights. There's, of course, lots of detail I won't go into, but that's the framework. What are our conclusions? I mean, the conclusions are that we clearly acknowledge the differences, and there are significant differences, between the lived experiences of Palestinians in Israel, East Jerusalem, the rest of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the diaspora. But our conclusion was that the treatment of Palestinians could only really be properly understood when you look at it holistically, when you look at the situation in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories combined. And we concluded that Israel operates a system of apartheid wherever it exercises control over Palestinian lives. So in Israel, in the occupied Palestinian territories, and with respect to Palestinian refugees in the diaspora. We felt that Israel's actions in all areas pursues the same objective: to privilege Jewish Israeli people in terms of the distribution of land and resources, and to minimize the presence and access to land of the Palestinian population. We also concluded that crimes against humanity of apartheid were being committed. Some of these we've seen examples of this evening. I mean, the forcible transfer of Palestinians from their homes, home demolitions, forced evictions, widespread administrative detention and torture, widespread excessive and lethal force against Palestinian protesters, many of whom are on the streets because without a vote, it's the only way to try to influence the state that controls their lives. And the denial of the rights of both Palestinian refugees and Palestinian citizens of Israel to reclaim their homes, their land, and their property. Why now is a question you're asking, Hani. I mean, first of all, I think it's fair to say this is true at Amnesty, but it's true more broadly and internationally, that there is increasing attention, rightly, on institutionalized discrimination more generally. And it was in this context that Amnesty established a global policy on apartheid in 2017. In Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories and beyond, there has been a growing debate. You referenced it, Hani. Palestinian NGOs have been arguing that the situation is apartheid for years. In the last couple of years, some key Israeli human rights organizations have come to the same conclusion. It was certainly time for Amnesty to take a position on this. And then there were very specific legislative and political developments in Israel-Palestine that we've seen over recent years. Just to take one example, the inaction of the nation-state law by Israel in 2018, we felt constitutionally enshrined racial discrimination against non-Jewish and therefore, for the vast majority, Palestinian people. Finally, on the added value, what's Amnesty trying to bring to this, given that others have gone before and obviously documented the abuses and set out the rationale for the use of the term apartheid before us? Well, first of all, some organizations have confined their conclusions, or at least their analysis, to the occupied Palestinian territories. We felt at Amnesty it was important that, and we've tried to bring this as added value, to provide a reasonably comprehensive, it's a long report, it's 280 pages, a holistic and historical analysis. We go back decades in tracing the patterns and where the current abuses stem from, and to do so on the basis of a global policy that we're applying consistently. We've concluded that the system, as I said, is not only a system that applies in the occupied Palestinian territories, but also in Israel, not just in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, but also with respect to Palestinian refugees. And we think that's really important. And we've talked about crimes against humanity of apartheid, not only in the occupied Palestinian territories, but also in Israel. And I think, what we were very happy about in just a month after Amnesty's report, I'm not saying this is just down to Amnesty, of course, but the fact that the UN, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, came to a similar conclusion on apartheid and acknowledged Amnesty's contribution to that conclusion. And I think, what we hope to have contributed is to a growing consensus on the existence of a situation of apartheid in Israel and Palestine, and to try to convert that growing consensus into increased pressure on Israel to dismantle that system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diana. Next question's for you. Is everything okay? Good, good.
Do you want to pass the mic over, Phil?
Oh,
It's
please,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Diana, you have been a dedicated human rights lawyer and part of multiple negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis. You've seen firsthand, by living in Haifa and Ramallah, what it means to be living as a Palestinian under apartheid. Can you please give us some examples as how you experience or witness apartheid in practice?
Thank you very much. First, I want to begin by thanking the organizers, and in particular my hosts, for being so generous. I want to thank my co-panelists. It's really a delight and an honor to share this stage with you. And of course, all of the volunteers and the people who've put in a lot of hard work into this, and of course you for showing up. I know that it's easy not to show up, so I appreciate it when people do show up. It says a lot about the state of the world that we're in now when I see an entire theater packed full of people who are committed and dedicated to ending this system of apartheid. So thank you. It's hard to watch these films because it's hard to watch your life from a distance. It's very difficult. And what's even more difficult is to then be transposed and to be reminded and to live that reality. And so you've asked me the question of what it's like to live under apartheid. I've been, in some ways, this is weird to say, but I've been one of the privileged few in Palestine because I have lived all throughout Palestine. I've lived in 48 Palestine, both in Nazareth, where my family is from, and in Haifa, as well as in the West Bank, in Ramallah, and in Nablus. I've lived in Jerusalem, and I'm one of the few people who has lived in the Gaza Strip, as a non-Gazan who's lived in the Gaza Strip. So what is apartheid like in practice? It's like this, but only more intense, and it's generational. And so I'm going to give you a few stories about what that generational aspect of it is. My late father, it's hard for me to say late father because he passed away not too long ago, and he was such a force in my life. He was born in Palestine, in a small town called Limjedel, right next to Nazareth. At the age of 9 was when it was 1948. And overnight, he not only became a refugee, but his whole world, the whole world as he knew it, was destroyed. His whole world. it wasn't just a question of taking over the house that he lived in, which they did take over and demolished. The Zionists took it over and demolished. It wasn't just the fact that they took over his school and demolished it, which they did. It wasn't just the fact that they took over the town. It's that they destroyed his community as he knew it. And it was never rebuilt after that. Now, in that period, in 1948, my father had an older sister who, she was born in Palestine. She got married in Palestine. She had her first child in Palestine. And like my father was 9 at the time, she was older, she also fled with her husband and child. Now, unlike my father, who managed to smuggle himself back into Palestine, it's a long story, my late aunt, Latife, she ended up living in a refugee camp in Jordan for the rest of her days, always wanting to do one thing, which was to return to Palestine. And so when you ask about what apartheid is in practice, it's that lived experience, that a woman who was born in Palestine, who was raised in Palestine, who got married in Palestine, who had her first child in Palestine, couldn't come back to Palestine because she's not Jewish. Whereas any person from around the world who is Jewish had a superior right to move to Palestine, and not just to move to Palestine, to move to the very hometown that my father was from. It was so painful when I first went to Al-Mjadal, now renamed Migdal HaEmek, to see that there was a sign that was put up that says, Migdal HaEmek, established in 1951. My father, I will have you know, was born in 1939. It's that attempt to try to erase us that we as Palestinians live through on a daily basis. Now, one thing that was missing in these films here was that there wasn't a single film about what it's like to live as a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and there weren't any films on Gaza. But in both of those scenarios, what is missing is that there's just an equally pervasive and powerful force that aims to try to eliminate our existence in historic Palestine. So in the case of Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, we live under different sets, we live under laws that privilege one group and don't give us the similar privileges. I've already told you one of them, which is the law of return. There's other laws, there are more than 60 that are on the books, that either directly or indirectly discriminate against us. Everything from not being able to choose where we want to live, to laws that directly target us when it comes to home demolitions. It's those same laws that are in place in the West Bank that go after and target Palestinians and make sure that they have lesser rights. You saw Ayman, Allah yatika sahya Ayman, that is Ayman, who is single-handedly forced to confront the Israeli settlers. And in the Gaza Strip, it's witnessing and living a siege that we're now marking it today. 15 years of a siege. And I want to be very clear in talking about this siege. This is not a siege on the Gaza Strip. This is a siege on children, because more than 50% of the people who live in the Gaza Strip are under the age of 18. This is sick. This is a sick regime that is targeting children and is aimed at trying to get rid of Palestinians in order to replace them with Israelis. And I'm going to end very quickly by saying, as Ayman said, they will uproot a tree, we will plant 1,000. They will try to do what they will try to do, and we will remain. The problem is that we can't just remain on our own, and we shouldn't be forced to remain on our own. This is where I believe international efforts need to be directed, because it's hard to fight a nuclear power on your own. We've done it so far, but this is where we need help.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Okay, pass the mic to Miko. Miko, your life story has evolved on a trajectory that bucks the curve. You grew up in a Zionist home with family that were early founders of Israel, and a father who was a leading general in the 1967 war, which led to the Israeli military occupation of Palestine's West Bank, Gaza Strip, Syria's Golan Heights, and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. You've gone through an evolutionary transformation in your understanding of Zionism. Is there room for a free Palestine while continuing support of Zionism?
Thank you, honey, and thank you for the organizer. I'll second what Diana said. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody here on the panel. It's a great privilege to be here. And also thanks to the people that are here. I also, like Diana said, every time I travel and I'm in cities, I was just in Italy, I had a few events there, you see a hall full of people who really, most of whom actually have absolutely no reason to be there or care. And here they are spending this lovely evening instead of outside, in here listening to us and engaging in this very, very important conversation. So my heartfelt thanks to all of you. So I come from the privileged side of apartheid. If anybody has any doubt that the Amnesty report is telling the truth, I can tell you absolutely, coming from the privileged side of apartheid, that the State of Israel from the very beginning was planned as an apartheid regime and is now executing the apartheid, an apartheid system, an apartheid regime, as it was planned to do, as it had planned to do from the very beginning. And I think it's very interesting that a state that calls itself the Jewish state, which I reject, but that's what they call themselves, is engaged in a crime that is so heinous that it's considered a crime against humanity. And this is a state that was established 3 years after the Holocaust. I think we need to take that into, take a moment to let that sink in. There is no question that the planners and the executors of the State of Israel had one thing in mind: ethnic cleansing, genocide, and an apartheid regime in order to execute this idea of a Jewish state in a country that's an Arab country, in Palestine. And I also want to agree with Diana. I think what was missing, but of course you can't have 10 movies in one evening, but what was missing is clearly the story of the Palestinians of 1948 and the story of Gaza. Now, I want to reframe or maybe explain some of the terminology. I reject the terminology that says Israel and the Palestinian occupied territories. I think that legitimizes something that should not be legitimized. It legitimizes the occupation of Palestine, the lion's share of Palestine, which was occupied in 1948. So if we want to differentiate, we can say the Palestinian territories occupied in 1948 and the Palestinian territories that were occupied in 1967. But to say Israel and Palestinian occupied territories legitimizes this creation of an apartheid regime which should not be legitimized. It also creates the impression that somewhere out there are Palestinian territories that are not occupied. So if these are the occupied territories, where are the unoccupied territories? There are none. All of Palestine has been occupied. There's a single state over all of it. It's the apartheid state. And if anybody, again, has any doubt, you can ask me as a person coming from the privileged side, or read the report. People are saying, oh my God, it's 280 pages long. How can I possibly read it? Read it. Print it, read it, and give a copy to your neighbors, and then give a copy to members of parliament. How long does it take to read 280 pages? It's one of the greatest gifts that were given to those of us who care about Palestine, and thank you, Amnesty International, for putting it together. It was not, I know it was not an easy task. I know some of the people who were involved, both from Amnesty and on the ground in Palestine. So there's no doubt that this is what it is. Now, all the attempts, and that goes to the question that Annie presented, all the attempts to somehow legitimize Zionism or aspects of Zionism by saying, well, there's liberal Zionism and there's cultural Zionism and there's good Zionism. There is one Zionism, and it is expressed in the apartheid regime. There is no other. There is no other Zionism. And anyone who tries to somehow portray Zionism as something else is either misguided or just lying straightforward. And when they say liberal Zionism, it's funny, I was just in Italy, it's kind of like saying a liberal fascist or something. It makes absolutely no sense. If you support Zionism, and Zionism again, the Zionists have written plenty from the very beginning and have said plenty. So you can always read what they said or listen to things that they continue to say to this day, like pushing a button and eliminating all of them, which was only said a few days ago. But there's a state. There's a history of Palestine over the last 75, actually more, close to 100 years, that demonstrate exactly what Zionism is about. It's on the ground, you can see it. Ethnic cleansing, genocide, which by the way are also crimes against humanity, which by the way are crimes that are very well defined. And if you have any doubt that the state of Israel, this apartheid regime, is engaged in those crimes, read the definition of the crimes and compare it to the last 75 years in Palestine. These are all crimes that are being committed on a regular basis every single day for the last 75 years at least in Palestine by this regime that likes to call itself Israel. So no, and this is part of the experience that I had to go through, because when you come from I came from not just a Zionist family, but a very Zionist family. I have people in my extended family who held important positions and established this and established that and signed this and signed that and all sorts of things. So I remember the conversations and I remember the things were being said, and of course I grew up very proud of that. Only later on to realize what this actually meant. And what that actually meant is that if you support Zionism, then you must support racism and violence against the people of Palestine. There is no other way. And there's no way to legitimize a part of the occupation and say, well, it's okay here. That's why we say Israel and the occupied territories. Because it doesn't work that way. Racism and violence don't know boundaries. All of Palestine is occupied, and the only thing that differentiates Palestine is the fact that Palestinians live under different sets of laws in different parts of the country. So you've got the 1948 Palestinians who have a supposedly kind of a citizenship, but it's completely different than my citizenship. Completely different. You're not going to see, they talk about home demolitions, and so we know that, Palestinians, this is an issue that's a very important issue. Palestinian homes get demolished. In 1948, by the way, of course, for Palestinians, it was citizens of Israel. And then when you look at the statistics, tens of thousands of home demolition orders, thousands of homes demolished every year, thousands every year. I'm not exaggerating. And I'm talking only about the 1948 part, without the West Bank. And how many of those home demolitions, thousands per year, and tens of thousands of demolition order, how many of them do you think go to the homes of Israelis, Israeli Jews? Anybody want to guess? 1%, 2%, 0%? I mean, it can't be that all Israelis never build without a permit. All Israelis are perfect and all Palestinians are criminals. Does that even make sense? I know Israelis that build without a permit. She wanted, in the movie, she wanted to just build a railing. I know people who have a balcony, they turn it into a room. But you got a permit, you have to pay, it's a bureaucracy, you have to wait. So they build. And one day, maybe an inspector will come and then write a report. Maybe they have to pay a fine, then they go to court. 5 years later, they go to court. You never, ever see the army close down a street and demolish the home of an Israeli Jew. Ever. Not once. And we're talking about thousands of cases of home demolitions per year for Palestinian citizens of Israel. So that's them. And by the way, they're not all the same, because the Palestinians who live in the southern part of Palestine, in the Naqab, which is the entire southern half of Palestine, live under an entirely different bureaucracy. the Agency for the Development of what they call the Negev, the Naqab, they call it the Negev. Why do the Palestinians, 350,000 Palestinians who live in the Naqab, have to have their own special bureaucracy? That's a whole other story. And then you've got Jerusalem, you've got what used to be the West Bank, but now is actually Judea and Samaria. And what characterizes Judea and Samaria is that the cities and towns there are surrounded by what they call a hostile, problematic population. That's what makes the Israeli towns and cities in that part of the country a little different. And then, of course, we've got the crime of the Gaza Strip, which I don't need to repeat. So, can Zionism be peaceful? No. It is a brutal, I said it 3 times, 4 times, I'll say it again. Any politician that dares to associate themselves with Zionism, anyone who dares to say that they are proud to be a Zionist needs to be called out until they retract. We cannot vote, we can never give our vote, and this should be very clear, and this is our part in what we do. We must never give our vote to any politician or never support any non-governmental organization that stands with Israel and associates with Zionism. Now, I'll say one last thing. The Amnesty report, which, like I said earlier, everybody here should read, has a list of recommendations for governments and non-governmental agencies, the things that they can do, in fact, that they must do, in order to bring down the apartheid regime, to stop the crime of apartheid. We need to demand of these non-governmental organizations and of our government officials that they adopt these recommendations. That's our job. That's what we need to do starting tomorrow morning. So no, you cannot be a Zionist and support justice and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Miko. All right, Lina, your Palestinian family was born in Safad and Nazareth, became refugees in 1948, and fled to Syria, eventually making their way to the United States. You were raised in Washington, D.C., and you have led much of your activism by creating a lobbying group for Palestine. I also know, like Diana, you have helped teach and mentor young activists on Palestine. Many people care about Palestinians and their human rights. How can change be fostered as individuals and within groups to make an impact?
First and foremost, I want to thank everyone who's here this evening because I know what a challenge it is to come and hear the realities of what's actually happening in Palestine and has been happening for the last 74 years. Second, I'm so happy that Miko spoke before me because everything he said, I am so happy he said it, and it wasn't me, a Palestinian American female, saying it. So thank God for Miko. And so happy. Anyway, so back to my family. Let me just give you a very brief history on my family. So my name is Lina Hadid. I'm from the Hadid family.
Lina, your mic.
I'm sorry, my grandparents and my mother, my Khalu Muhammad, and my 2 aunts are all Nakba survivors. I recently lost my mother unexpectedly. She recently passed away, so I'm still digesting that. It's only been a few months. But I think the hardest thing with losing my mother, just like it was with my grandparents, was that she was born in Nazareth, Palestine. She is Palestinian. We are Palestinian. My family was kicked out violently in 1948 out of Nazareth, and they never had the right to return. So forget about me, my generation. Forget about my kids. It's over. They will not allow us back into Palestine. So we really are refugees. I know I might look chic, right? Because I wear red suede shoes, but I'm a refugee. You know, I really am. I'm obviously not the ones that were sent to the camps. We're not that family, but my family had to walk to Syria. My grandmother had to dress like a peasant, and the only thing she could wear were her gold bracelets that she stacked up her arm, and she was able to pay for the first 3-4 months until my grandfather sought employment from the Syrian government. My grandmother continued to have 4 more children. She already had 4 in Nazareth. She continued to have 4 more in Syria. Why? Because she was convinced, khair, Dahar Hadid was convinced that she was going back to Palestine. She never thought for a millisecond she wasn't going to go back. And guess what? 1948 until 1969, 21 years later, my grandmother, Khair Dahar Hadid, got her American passport, and they finally let her visit her family after 21 years. Meanwhile, they moved to 3 different continents and landed in the United States. And no matter what, watching my grandparents and now watching my mother pass away, if there is one thing that I have learned, it's that we deserve the right to return to Palestine. We are Palestinian. We have 4,000 years of history in Palestine. What can we do? I have been an activist since I was a child. I was a Brownie, a Girl Scout. I was president of Students Against Drugs, drunk driving. I was president of my class, captain of the cheerleading squad. I did it all. In college, president of the International Student Association. In law school, president of the International Law Student Association. I have been an activist my whole life. All I can say is the more activists we have, the more people that join the Palestine lobby, join IMEU, join the Jewish Voice for Peace, join Amnesty International, volunteer, help, find safe spaces like this one here where we can communicate and we can get the message out. Because the reality is very, very simple. We, the Palestinians, are on the right side of history. There is no question. What happened to us in 1948... There is no question. What happened to us in 1948 should never have happened. What happened in 1917 between the UK, the United Kingdom, and Sir Rothschild, what happened there should have never happened. The Balfour Agreement, which Miko and I spoke about in 2017 at the 100th year anniversary at Westminster in the UK. 100 years since Balfour. That should have never occurred. Everything Miko said is absolutely on point. I am not allowed to say it because I am an American Palestinian attorney, lobbyist, activist. So I'm not allowed to say it. But everything he said is absolutely on point. What can we do? I train activists. Anyone who wants to join the Palestine lobby, please join us. Anyone who wants to help, please help us. Anyone who needs help, let us help you. Let me help you get funding for any project. Let us help you. That's what we're here to do. But you have to have these services where we can reach out. Let everyone apply their democratic rights in whatever country they live in. And they need to have an appeal to their governments. We should be on the ground talking to Macron about why he refuses to allow us even to be anti-Zionist in France. We should be addressing this. We should be addressing with the Swiss government why they are not reacting enough to the Palestinian situation. We should be addressing these questions. We have the right. We are people living in democratic nations. We have the right. The people who don't have the right, those are the Palestinians. The Palestinians that are stuck in Israel, because there's no Palestine. It's all Israel. They took it all. They are stuck. They're stuck. Half of the population. They are subjected to, everything we saw here and more. I have such a hard time understanding that we have an open air prison with 2 million people in Gaza. 2 million people that are living in an open air prison that have water rationing. They are rationing their water, okay? This needs to be addressed, and we can address it. We have the right to go to our governments. We have the right to get together, to convene. We have the right to demonstrate. We have the right to question our governments, question the Swiss government, question the French government, and by all means, good luck with the American government. But but at least the Europeans, they're intellectual enough to be able to actually have a discussion. I grew up in the United States, and let me tell you, in the US, when you look like me, I look a little different. When you look different, they say, where are you from? You say you're Palestinian. The first response is that does not exist. That was my childhood. You do not exist. That cannot happen. We have to address this. Today, the Palestinians don't even have a presence in the United States, and we actually are not even recognized under US law. Neither Palestinians nor Palestine. This is how bad it's gotten. So, The long and the short is that it's been 70 years, 74 years too long. My mother was born in 1944. She just recently passed away. I promised her that we were going to return to Palestine, and we didn't. And I couldn't even get her body to Palestine because they won't even take the body of a dead Palestinian, even one that was born in Palestine. So what can we do? We need to scream, and we need to shout, and we need to be loud, and we need to free Palestine.
Anne-Catherine, do you have your... Okay, good. As a former member of the Swiss Parliament, you have embarked on trips to Palestine and have also taken a clear stand to support BDS. As many of our audience members are Swiss, can you share with us what you have seen firsthand in your visits? And second, what should the Swiss government be doing to dismantle this apartheid regime?
Bonjour à tout le monde, merci de m'avoir invité. Je voudrais commencer par dire que après les images que nous avons vues tout à l'heure, je m'aperçois qu'il y a un monde, un fossé, une distance absolument extraordinaire entre cette vérité-là et ce qui se passe dans un Parlement. Je voudrais aussi revenir sur cette question de mes voyages, parce que je fais partie des gens qui pensent que l'émotion, l'indignation, les sentiments sont un moteur politique extrêmement important, plus important souvent que les chiffres et les mots. Et sur ces deux voyages que j'ai pu faire en 2002 et en 2007, étaient très complémentaires. Le premier, en 2002, m'a plongé dans la sauvagerie de l'intervention israélienne dans les territoires de Cisjordanie. Ça m'a laissé une impression extrêmement durable, en particulier à Jenin. Et j'ai compris ce que c'était que cette violence qui s'exerce au jour le jour. Le deuxième voyage va vous intéresser, parce qu'il se trouve que dans ce groupe dont je faisais partie, il y avait un jeune Palestinien né dans un camp de réfugiés en Jordanie, qui n'était jamais venu en Israël, mais qui avait un passeport suisse, il vit en Suisse. Et déjà à l'aéroport de Tel Aviv, on pensait qu'il n'arriverait jamais à entrer dans le pays, sans l'intervention de l'ambassadeur suisse qui est venu qui a intervenu pour le faire sortir. Ensuite, nous sommes allés avec lui dans les ruines d'un village, je crois que ça s'appelait Soumata. Il n'y avait plus que quelques buissons et quelques murs. Et c'était le village où avaient vécu ses grands-parents et où étaient nés ses parents, et qu'il voyait pour la première fois. Et là, il a commencé à mettre un peu de terre dans un pot, parce qu'il avait promis à sa mère qu'il lui rapporterait la terre de son pays d'origine. Et en faisant ça, il a trouvé une petite clé. Et il nous a montré cette petite clé comme ça, on était très surpris, ça n'avait pas l'air d'être quelque chose de vraiment qui avait de la valeur, mais le soir même, nous avons visionné le film qui s'appelle La Clé. Et c'était vraiment une coïncidence extraordinaire parce que nous avons compris ce que c'est que le droit au retour et ce que c'est que d'être reconnu comme Palestinien. À part ça, à Jérusalem-Est et aussi dans l'Israël auprès des Palestiniens israéliens, nous avons aussi compris ce qu'est l'apartheid. Et là, vraiment, je suis extrêmement heureuse de savoir que ce rapport existe, fondé de manière juridique, sûre, parce que j'ai souvent repris ce terme, mais avec toujours cette inquiétude, surtout au Parlement, de me faire reprendre sur ce terme. Je dirais d'ailleurs que le rapport a fait l'objet d'une question au Parlement suisse, tout récemment, qui n'a pas eu de débat, mais que le Conseil fédéral a rejeté, enfin, il n'a pas rejeté, il a renvoyé à une instance judiciaire la question de savoir si c'était valable ou donc pas de politique prévue pour ça. Je voudrais juste présenter quelques-unes des interventions qui sont faites au Parlement suisse. Donc, en rentrant des voyages, j'ai évidemment interrogé le gouvernement sur ce que j'avais vu, et en particulier sur la destruction d'infrastructures à Ramallah, payées par la Suisse et d'autres, vol aussi des disques durs. Il y avait eu des arrestations des collaborateurs, dont un d'ailleurs est décédé, pour savoir si la Confédération suisse allait demander un dédommagement pour voilà, cette destruction de ce qu'elle avait payé. Là, on m'a répondu que oui, c'était très ennuyeux ce qui s'était passé, mais qu'un cadeau, c'est un cadeau, et que donc ça n'appartient plus à la Suisse, et que du coup, Israël ou les Palestiniens peuvent en faire ce qu'ils veulent. Voilà. Mais qu'effectivement, on pouvait quand même intervenir pour déplorer ce saccage de ce matériel. Une autre intervention, alors peut-être encore plus forte et qui est revenue très souvent, c'est celle de la collaboration militaire entre la Suisse et Israël. Parce que je crois que c'était en 2004, au moment de nouveau, excusez-moi si les dates ne sont pas complètement justes, mais c'est quand même un certain temps, il y avait eu une intervention de nouveau de l'armée israélienne en Cisjordanie. Et à cette occasion, pour la première fois d'ailleurs, un conseiller fédéral a répondu à mon intervention que oui, c'était une violation du droit international, que c'était pas acceptable. Les médias ont d'ailleurs remarqué que c'était la première fois qu'une critique était prononcée. Et il a continué en disant qu'il allait charger le ministère de l'armée de voir dans quelle mesure il pourrait peut-être ralentir un peu la collaboration militaire avec Israël. Alors, évidemment, quelques mois plus tard, j'ai interrogé le responsable militaire en lui demandant où il en était dans sa recherche des restrictions dans la collaboration. Et il m'a dit « Ah mais non, on n'a pas fait une recherche particulière, toutes les années on fait ça. On regarde, on fait la liste et puis on voit si ça va ou si ça ne va pas. » Mais il n'y avait donc rien de politique à ce propos-là. Et d'ailleurs, il y a ensuite le Conseil fédéral, je vous ai renoté quelques passages parce que ça vaut la peine. À propos de ces interventions, le Conseil fédéral dit ceci: il n'est pas question de prendre des sanctions, mais d'examiner certaines modalités de coopération à la lumière d'une situation de guerre. Et au vu des nombreuses violations commises, et voilà, c'est ça, examiner les moyens de restreindre la coopération. Donc, on est là vraiment dans des réponses extrêmement lénifiantes, peu importantes. J'ai quand même fait un petit vol au-dessus de toutes les interventions concernant la Palestine et Israël ces 20 dernières années. Et ce qui m'a frappé, c'est qu'il y a énormément d'interventions, que beaucoup sont de gauche, mais quand même quelques-unes de droite, que c'est assez clivé, c'est-à-dire que les parlementaires de gauche interrogent sur l'interdiction des importations, par exemple, de produits des colonies, sur l'interdiction de la collaboration militaire, sur le refus. Il y avait un projet qui a d'ailleurs qui a été réalisé, d'acheter un système électronique pour l'armée, Et ça, effectivement, le Conseil fédéral nous a dit que ce n'était pas possible d'y renoncer. C'est très, très important, enfin, notre sécurité. Enfin, voilà. Et puis, en plus, on a déjà payé cher, alors on ne m'a pas arrêté. Et puis, Israël avait promis qu'il y aurait des affaires compensatoires. Donc, voilà, qu'on pourrait faire des affaires avec ça. Donc, on ne voulait quand même pas perdre cette belle occasion. Voilà. Et à droite, les critiques viennent essentiellement autour de l'UNRWA, qui passe pour une organisation antisémite, inutile, qui prolonge voilà, les problèmes plutôt que de le régler, ou aussi, d'une manière générale, autour des Palestiniens qui résistent à toute négociation. En particulier, sur la question, il y a une question qui est un peu amusante, c'était le projet de Donald Trump pour la paix en Israël, Palestine, qui a fait quand même, voilà, j'entends les réactions autour de moi, qui a fait quand même rire pas mal de gens. Et là, le Conseil fédéral nous dit que, ben voilà, c'est un projet. En fait, si les Israéliens et les Palestiniens se mettent autour d'une table et discutent de ce projet, ben nous, on est contents. Donc voilà, c'est pour vous dire le vide. Il n'y a jamais eu de débat. Ces interventions sont posées par des parlementaires. Le Conseil fédéral répond. Il n'y a jamais eu un débat autour de ces questions-là. Donc on reste là comme ça et on ne va pas beaucoup plus loin. Je voulais encore juste donner quelques exemples de ce vide dans la réaction officielle du gouvernement, cette manière un peu parfois naïve ou même un peu ridicule de poser les choses. J'avais aussi déposé une intervention à propos d'une mission d'observateurs à Hébron, laquelle mission a assisté sans pouvoir rien faire à la démolition de 3 immeubles privant de logement 60 personnes. Donc, évidemment, j'ai dit, ben alors, à quoi elle sert? Est-ce qu'on peut pas quand même lui donner des moyens? Et la réponse du Conseil fédéral, elle est exemplaire. Et il dit ceci: leur présence physique dans la ville, au travers des réunions avec les autorités israéliennes et palestiniennes locales, a contribué à une normalisation progressive de la situation, en apportant, attendez, ça c'est encore mieux, en apportant un sentiment de sécurité aux Palestiniens. Et leur mandat a été reconduit. Donc voilà, on est en face d'un dialogue de sourds, il ne se passe rien. La seule réponse qui revient constamment, je pourrais encore justement dire ça, c'est que même si c'est des interventions de droite ou de gauche, le Conseil fédéral répond la même chose. Donc ça veut dire, nous tenons pour très très important le respect du droit international et des conventions de Genève et patati et patata. Nous donnons énormément de peine pour que les partenaires ou les protagonistes se mettent autour d'une table et discutent, et nous essayons de les aider pour ça. Donc voilà, on est dans une réponse qui est tout à fait banalisante. Je crois que je vais m'arrêter là parce qu'après, peut-être, si j'ai l'occasion, je reviendrai plus à fond sur cette perspective politique de la Suisse par rapport à ces problèmes.
Thank you, Anne-Catherine. Thank you. All right. So, in the interest of time, we are going to have a Q&A with the audience, and we encourage you to ask questions. We're going to probably take this to about 20 to 25 minutes, and we're going to run about 10 minutes over. So I would like to ask you politely to please come up to the side aisle to meet with either Celine or Kate to utilize the mic. And we have a lady over there, Kate, right straight ahead.
Are you going to take a few? Is this one working?
Well, I think we have...
Yeah? I'm sorry, it was a
Can you
bit
please
difficult
stand up and come and... Thank you, dear.
We'll take a few at a time, guys, yeah? And then we can... Yeah, that way it's
We have
quicker.
time.
Rania, hi.
Thank you very much for all interventions. And I thank the organizers, the choice of films. It was amazing.
Can you keep the mic?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I have, in fact, many questions. I thank you, Miko, because you dare to say what the others doesn't dare. And I mean not here, but I mean everywhere, you know. So my question to you, do you think we have to wait until a new Israeli generation recognize the right of Palestinians? This is one issue. My question to Madame, and because I have many questions. Quickly.
2 questions, please.
According to your intervention, so for me, Geneva Initiative was the big failure. It's a waste of money and time and dreams. So what do you wait for next? And my last question for Amnesty International. Of course, the importance of the report, we recognize all. This is why this is not the first really meeting. But there is many things, and I'm sorry to say, it's good really to highlight. First of all, it doesn't exist any way when you mention recommendations about, especially you mentioned apartheid, but you didn't mention that to end Zionist system, this is how we can end apartheid. The second issue, which is very important, you mentioned the Jewish right of self-determination, but it was never mentioned in your report about the Palestinian right of self-determination. And the last, for the moment, which is, in fact, we don't want reform. Your report mentioned reforms. We don't want equal life. We want really to end this system of colonization. Thank you.
Should we go ahead? Okay, thank you for your question. I don't think Palestinians should wait even one more second. Not for anything. Certainly not for Israelis. I told this story when I was in Italy. The cab driver in Rome from the airport to the hotel saw I was wearing kufiyah, and he said, "So where are you from?" I said, "Palestine." He said, "Oh, so how are things going in your country?" And I thought, what? Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered. This was big news. 2 days later, her funeral was assaulted by an armed, battalion of police. Palestinian kids in Jenin and are dying, are being killed. Their blood is spilling like water. In Gaza, 2 million people have no water. I mean, what does he expect me to say? Oh yeah, everything's fine. What kind of an absurd question is this? And the reason I bring it up is because there's the normalcy of the horror needs to stop yesterday. Now we're too late for Shireen Abu Akleh. And we're too late for the Palestinian kids who died yesterday and earlier today. But we need to be there to stop the next one. A good friend of mine, Isa Amro from Hebron, Amnesty designated him a human rights defender. He is being targeted now for the last week, harassed. His home is being invaded. He was arrested, detained, kept for hours and hours in handcuffs and for no reason. But now that they killed Shireen and nothing happened, they can kill Isa Amro. They care that he is a Amnesty International. So we need to stand there physically and make sure they don't kill him, because we didn't do that with Shireen. We need to be there. So we can't wait anymore, and Palestinians shouldn't wait anymore, and certainly do not think that if you wait another 1,000 years, Israeli society will change. Racist societies only change when they bring them down to their knees, and they have no choice. And that's precisely what needs to happen in Israel. Israeli society needs to know they cannot go overseas. They can't participate in FIFA. They can't participate in the Olympics. They are not welcome in universities. They're not welcome in cultural events. There must be severe sanctions. And like I said earlier, any politician that supports Israel needs to be voted out, and immediately. But this is up to us. We can't wait for Salah ad-Din anymore. He's not coming. It's done. We need to be there. We need to stand. So absolutely, there should be no more waiting. Action should take now, because my friend Isa Amro is scared for his life, and he's been detained and arrested and targeted for a very long time. But there was kind of a lull, and now it's back, and it's scary. And I'm horrified that his son is going to become an orphan, because if he does, If he does, it's going to be in social media for 3-4 days, and that's it. But the orphan will remain an orphan forever, and we will have lost another incredible human being. So no more waiting, absolutely not. We need to act, and we need to act right now.
Thank you, Miko. Anne-Catherine? I think it's Anne-Catherine first. Second part of the question. Do you remember the question?
Juste une petite réponse à propos de l'initiative de Genève. Parce que, voilà, j'ai tout à l'heure dit que pratiquement tous les conseillers fédéraux, donc tous les membres du gouvernement suisse donnent les mêmes réponses. Quand même, Micheline Calmiret a essayé de faire un pas de plus et de mettre sur pied quelque chose. Mais c'est vrai que l'accueil de cette initiative a été très mauvais. Beaucoup ont pensé que c'était pas sérieux, que de toute façon ça n'aboutirait à rien. Et maintenant, récemment, le nouveau chef du département des Affaires étrangères a décidé de suspendre complètement cette initiative. Donc c'est encore un signe que cette politique qui de temps en temps avait un peu d'énergie pour envisager quelque chose est en train de sombrer.
All right. Phil?
Sure. Thanks very much. Appreciate the questions. And I mean, there's no question that we wouldn't claim as Amnesty that the list of recommendations is complete. And there are many other recommendations that you could make within other frameworks. I guess just on your point on the right to self-determination, what the report acknowledges, it's not a report about the right to self-determination. It does acknowledge that both the Palestinian and the Jewish people claim the right to self-determination. What Amnesty doesn't do is then make determinations on what the application of that right should look like in practice. I mean, that's just not where Amnesty goes. It's not part of its mandate. But it's a massive question. So, there are others should be answering that question clearly. On the system, it's a fair critique of, I guess, what I would say, in fairness, is that the summary recommendation is to dismantle the apartheid system. And Amnesty's, in answer, because what this report does is make an argument that there is a system of apartheid, it's a holistic system, and within that system there are crimes against humanity of apartheid that are being committed. So it tries to then offer a response to that, and the response is to dismantle the system, and it answers within a human rights framework what it believes needs to be done to dismantle the system. That does mean changing laws. It means getting rid of laws. It means getting rid of practices, stopping practices. It means the army not doing what we've been seeing in these videos, and so on. But I'm not saying that's the only framework you can use. You can use another framework and come up with a bolder recommendation. I acknowledge that.
Okay, one here.
Yes, go ahead, Kate.
Oui, ok. Oui, bonsoir. Alors, ma question est que l'entité sioniste d'Israël pratique l'apartheid, pratique une politique raciste, colonialiste et sanguinaire. Et chaque jour, depuis 1948, les crimes continuent. Israël agit en toute impunité. Le Tsahal tue, emprisonne des enfants, détruire des maisons, surtout à Sheikh Jarrah. Donc voilà, on le sait, tout le monde le sait. Mais pourquoi les pays européens, les Occidentaux, est-ce qu'ils ont peur d'Israël? Pourquoi les États-Unis fournissent 3 milliards de dollars par année comme aide militaire pour bombarder Gaza, qui est une prison à ciel ouvert, où il y a 2 millions de personnes qui vivent dans des conditions inhumaines? Ma question est, pourquoi on a peur d'Israël? Est-ce qu'il y a un lobby sioniste international qui met une pression sur la presse, qui met une pression sur les gouvernements? Voilà ma question. Je me pose des questions. On est en 2022 et depuis 1948, on ne bouge pas le petit doigt. Pourquoi?
Merci. Alors, c'était quand même beaucoup de questions, mais cool, merci.
Thank you.
Should I take a few more? Can we have some more hands?
Who would like to answer that?
Yeah, here. I'll hold it for you. Oh, question, please. Just a question.
I think she wants to take another question.
Do you want to? Let's take a. Do you want to answer it, Diana? Let's take a few, because then you guys can speak for longer. All right.
Kate, we might forget it. Just hold on, please.
Okay. Cool.
I'm going to respond in English. I understand the French, but a different language comes out when I open my mouth. Why? Look, there's a lot of reasons. The first reason is, yes, there is the presence of a pro-Israel Zionist lobby that's in the United States. And that Zionist lobby works alongside with a Christian lobby. And it's the equivalent of, arm wrestling with a baby. There's nothing the equivalent on the Palestinian side. But that's only part of the reason. The other part of the reason that there's so much support for Israel is because it's also in the United States' perceived, and I say perceived interest. If you look at the Arab world as an Arab world, from Morocco all the way to Iraq, this is one of the few regions in the world with such rich resources where we, as a people, and this is important, have not had the right to self-determination as a people. And the reason that this has been done is this well predates the establishment of AIPAC, it well predates any lobby, is because well over 100 years ago, the United States said, if we allow this region as a region with the resources that it has to remain as it is, we will no longer have control. So Israel was also a part colonial project of the United States, just in the same way that there were other colonial nations that have had colonial designs in other parts of Africa, or all of Africa, and in other countries within the Arab Middle East. This is the United States' colonial project. So the idea that somehow we're going to dismantle this colonial project by working in the United States, to me, is a little bit foolish. It's to the opposite. The United States will always be Israel's #1 enabler. It will always be Israel's #1 supporter. If you look at the amount of money that the United States gives to Israel, get this, it gives more money to this one crappy garbage country called Israel than the entire continent of Africa combined. One country gets more money than the entire continent of Africa combined. And it's a rich country. Thank you, Mikkel. And it's a rich country where you see that the GDP of individuals, of the nation, is actually higher than in some states in the United States. In the United States, you cannot get universal health care. You can't get a free education, at higher education. You can't even get subsidized. But the one thing, like Switzerland, that the left and the right agree upon is this colonial country, this colonial outpost called Israel. That's the reason that there's so much support for it. It's part and parcel of what the United States wants, and it's also because of the presence of a lobby. I hope I answered the question well. I hope I understood it. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana, Kate, I know you have that question over there.
So we've got at least 1, 2, 3, 4,
What are two more
5.
questions, I think?
5. So 2, would you guys be okay if I take 2 now and then 2 more?
Let's take 2, okay.
Yeah?
Okay, as long as it's not a long...
Question.
It's really great to be in Geneva because I think, as evidenced by the audience and the panelists tonight, this is a place where people who are working in anti-apartheid activism, both in the UN and in the bodies of international law and governments, and people who are working at a local level and a Swiss level are at the same place. And I think about that because some of us are students from the Geneva Graduate Institute who worked on BDS work there and in our student body, and had a bit of a tough time with it. But we saw a lot of the support from local organizations, but not so much from organizations within international Geneva, even though there are a lot of, I think, really like-minded people and great thinkers there. So my question, maybe for Amnesty International, but also for everyone who's working, through the bodies of international law and these organizations, how do you go about that work, knowing that that's not just sort of a platform to talk about these issues and come to solutions, but often those institutions are also local sites and specific sites of reproducing the biases and some of the attitudes that let people turn a blind eye to apartheid politics.
Thank you. That's Phil and I were talking about that today.
Who's going to pick up that question? You. Okay. There's a mic right there, Phil. Do you want to take one more question? A quick. Okay, go ahead.
Very quick. Just thinking of pragmatic steps, and really great for the frank openness by Madam Anne-Catherine on the Swiss position. And I guess for the benefit of people who live in Switzerland and Swiss people in the room, noting that Switzerland will be in the Security Council next year. And again, noting setting parameters on what's realistic. But for the first time in 40 years, 1 week after the invasion of Ukraine, the Security Council members bypassed paralysis to get a meeting with the UN General Assembly to discuss the invasion of Ukraine. The outcomes of that remains to be seen and the effect, etc. But it's the first time in 40 years that paralysis has been bypassed due to lack of political will and the vetoing power of a permanent member. Do we have any pragmatic steps or recommendations that we can take in Switzerland to lobby the government in terms of their policy and engagement at the Security Council level, noting again they are prioritizing IHL, human rights and diplomacy? Okay. If I get any closer, I'm going to be eating the mic. Apologies.
All right. Thank you. All right, Phil. The first part.
Yes, so first of all, on the question of BDS, I mean, I guess Amnesty isn't itself a BDS organization, but I guess it does a lot of work in terms of defending BDS activists' right to undertake BDS action. So I guess that's where we come from. And of course, where we see is attempts, whether it's in Israel or whether it's in a number of different countries. You can see that partly in Germany, you can see that in the US, where there are attempts to shut down that activism through law or through other means. And it's important, I think, and I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that we resist those, because those attempts to shut down that type of activism and to label it in some way as anti-Semitic or something like that is wholly inappropriate, one, and two, it's an erosion of an undermining of people's right to freedom of expression. So in that sense, I guess that's our position. But others may want to come in with on BDS more broadly.
Excellent. And Catherine? No? The second, who would like?
No, I thought she was.
Are we good? That's what, did you hear the question about the Swiss involvement? Would you like to respond to that, Anne-Catherine? That's why. Didn't want to run the questions fast. Okay.
Ah ouais. Bon, alors, première chose avec la question qui est venue avant sur pourquoi effectivement rien ne se passe en Suisse. J'aurais une réponse très tranchante et rapide, c'est que la Suisse a besoin d'Israël pour ses affaires. Voilà. Mais il y en a une autre. Ça veut dire qu'il ne faut pas sous-estimer le clivage qui existe encore dans ce pays entre les défenseurs d'Israël et les défenseurs des Palestiniens. Si j'ai dit qu'il n'y avait jamais eu de vrai débat au Parlement, c'est parce que ce débat n'aboutirait à rien. Toutes les interventions de la droite remettent en question l'aide aux réfugiés, le retour des réfugiés, et la mauvaise foi et le terrorisme palestinien. Je peux vous dire que j'écris souvent des chroniques. Quand j'écris des chroniques sur la Palestine, je reçois régulièrement des lettres anonymes ou des appels de gens qui protestent que c'est absolument scandaleux. Donc actuellement, ce serait peut-être différent dans la population suisse. Parce que ça, c'est un point que je trouve important, mais qu'on ne peut pas développer ici. Je pense que souvent, la population est plus progressiste que les institutions. Et que là, il y a un mouvement qui pourrait vraiment se faire jour et avoir peut-être une influence.
Et qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire?
Eh bien alors, ben ça, je renvoie en fait la question aussi à Urgence Palestine et tous les groupes qui soutiennent les Palestiniens. Parce qu'effectivement, d'ailleurs, dans une intervention, Carlos Omaruga, qui est beaucoup intervenu au Parlement pour défendre les Palestiniens avec beaucoup de vigueur, lui, il estime que la population suisse est très favorable aux Palestiniens, qu'elle est très scandalisée par cette politique, qu'elle soutient BDS. Et puis, voilà, moi, je n'ai pas cette impression. Donc là-dessus, je ne peux pas juger. Et je renvoie à tous les militants. Je me considère comme une militante, mais voilà, c'est un ordre d'action qui n'est pas le même que l'institution. Alors, que les militants qui sont là continuent à militer, peut-être que... Enfin, je ne sais pas, je suis très pessimiste, peut-être que je reviendrai après en conclusion, mais je suis très pessimiste sur l'évolution de la politique suisse en matière de conflit israélo-palestinien.
Hani, may I just, before we pass to...
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah, on the UN or anything else, Lena, please,
On
because
the
I think they're
US
big questions.
and Swiss, because as she just explained, it is definitely an interest, and they have a vested interest with Israel. I think it's very simple. It's gangster capitalism coupled with Zionism. That's what's happened. The U.S. is a country that runs. It's a debt-based society. I mean, it's a country that runs on consumption. So you've got the gangster capitalism, and then you've got the Zionism. And it's not only Jewish Zionists anymore. We have 80 million Christian Zionists just in the United States. 80 million. That's a lot of Zionists, okay? And then we have Zionists in France. They're all over the place. I mean, go check Élysée. They're everywhere. We have Zionists here. And that's the problem. It's gangster capitalism with Zionism. They want access to our 5 Cs. They want access to the Middle East and all our ports and all the trading. And this goes back 100 years. This has nothing to do with religion at all. They actually Zionists, they hijacked Judaism and use that as a front, at least in the United States, what I saw growing up, so that everyone would blindly give money. The U.S. gives as much as $9 billion in total. In my law firm, you could give up to 15 to 20% of your annual salary to the state of Israel. And that's in Manhattan, okay? So, I mean, I think it's gangster capitalism coupled with Zionism. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Do we have one more quick question, Kate? One quick question.
Oh, wait, there's 3 people waiting, though.
Okay, then we've got to end it because we're running over time. Go ahead. Please.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be brief. Just in terms of a vision for the future, once we dismantle apartheid and the settler colonial regime, inshallah, do you envision that this will materialize in the form of a one democratic state? And do you think that such a state is possible? And another burning question for Lina Hadid, are you related to Gigi and Bella Hadid? And the reason I ask is I want to tip my hat off to them and to all celebrities and others who are really changing the narrative on Palestine in the United States. Thank you.
Yes, Bella is my first cousin, and so is Gigi. Their father is my uncle, my mother's brother, so yes. I lobby my family every single day of the year, so just so everyone knows.
How safe is that to lobby your family?
It's very hard. So we personally receive death threats every day, so on a daily basis. My cousin Bella in particular now, because she's much more vocal. We have a lot of security concerns. I mean, I have lots of friends in the audience here who have seen me attacked, spat on, many other things in public places. So yeah, it's very, very hard to be an activist, but it doesn't matter. I think that every single person, even more non-Palestinians and Palestinians, should be an activist for the Palestinian cause. I cannot say it. It's been 74 years too long. I'm so happy that the world has reacted to the Ukrainian situation so well, especially Switzerland. But this sets the goal for the rest of us. Now we need to react to the other. There are so many countries around the world where this is happening. And I just personally feel that we should consider Palestine first, since it's been 74 years, and since it's ongoing and it's not stopping. People like myself today, along with the head of the Jewish Voice for Peace, along with the head of IME, everyone, we're all afraid. I mean, we know that we get so many death threats at any given time, somebody could shoot us. And, you know, we understand that we have to take one for the cause, but I don't think any of us are worth anything 6 feet underground. We need to be above ground, and we need to be fighting, and we need to be demonstrating, and we need to especially be exercising our democratic rights, since we have them.
Excellent. All right.
One more
question, Kate. Did you get the second part? So who would like to answer it?
So I am one state solution. I think
Okay.
there is no more Palestine, sorry. I think there is only Israel today. I believe that half of the population should at least have basic rights. We aren't even going to ask for human rights today, and we're not even going to ask for civil rights. We need basic rights for the Palestinians. Basic rights in their homeland. Call it whatever you want to call it, but basic rights. You cannot have a nation state like Israel. There is a nation state law, and it's a nation state. If you are not Jewish, you cannot live in Israel/Palestine. It is a country that is, there are Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, what have you, are not allowed. It's a nation state law. Look up the nation state law. It's amended in 2018. Very interesting.
Miko, do you want to speak to the solution?
Yeah, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Or Diana?
Please. And then I'll speak after you.
Well, I think that's this is a key question. You know, unless we can envision, unless we're absolutely clear about what we're doing and what we're for, then what are we doing? We have to be very clear what we're against, and my statement earlier, I think I made that pretty clear, what we need to be against. What are we for also has to be clear. When we say free Palestine, what does that mean? And I think very often that is not clear enough. Sometimes it's not clear at all. So when we say dismantling the apartheid regime, what we should be envisioning is the creation of a free democratic Palestine. What is Palestine? Where is Palestine? I think we need to be absolutely clear about that. From the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, from the northern borders with Lebanon to the Gulf of Aqaba. Palestine is a very, it's a pretty well-determined place. We're a very well-determined country. And we need to envision, and we need to, in other words, that's where we're going as a goal, a free, democratic, one-person, one-vote state. Now, very often when we say this, or at least when I say this, people get the impression that that's it, we've arrived. A single democracy, a free democratic Palestine, and everything's going to be fine. A free democratic state in Palestine is the basis. Now, how do we need to put together mechanisms for the Palestinian refugees to return. Now we need to figure out reparations. Now we have to figure out, dismantling the siege on Gaza, freeing the people of Gaza, close to 1 million refugees that have a right to return to their homes as well. They're within Palestine, but they're refugees. And on and on and on. Questions of citizenship, question of the Constitution, the nature of the state, and so forth. So this idea of, and by the way, none of these issues, the siege on Gaza, political prisoners, water deprivation, and on and on and on, will never be resolved as long as the state of Israel exists, as long as this entity exists. So when we look beyond that, we need to understand a single democratic, free Palestine is the foundation, and then we can start working on all these other issues that need to be resolved urgently. And I think that has to be made very, very clear so we know what we're against, but we also know very clearly what it is that we're for and why.
All right, Diana.
Very quickly, yes, I agree, Miko. And I want to put it in a way that I think people, I hope, will resonate. When Palestinians say one state, that's hugely generous. That's really generous. It really is. I mean, think about it. We're offering to share our country with the very people who ethnically cleansed us, who colonized us, who've demolished our homes, who've killed our children, who've wounded us, who've besieged us. That's huge. That's really huge. And so I think that when we talk about one state and what it means, I think it's also important for people to understand what a mammoth and how generous that is when people are talking about one state, because it is effectively saying that we are opening our hands. Yes, we are dismantling, we are decolonizing, we are getting rid of this system, but it's very, very, very generous to the people who have so wronged us for so many years.
Okay. One final question, I think. We're just going to run a few minutes
Bonsoir.
over.
Je vais la poser en français. Je voulais juste dire que de plus en plus, je me sens très mal quand je vois les films que Dismantle International présente, parce que ça fait des années que je les vois, que j'ai pu aller en cours militaire avec Khaled Kousmaf, l'actuel président, qui d'ailleurs rien à voir avec un tribunal, c'est tout sauf ça. Ma question va peut-être sembler très subsidiaire, mais quand je sais et je vois maintenant ces enfants, les photos, les enfants qui témoignent de ce qu'ils ont vécu, et qu'après on apprend qu'ils sont morts, moi j'ai partagé avec Khaled Kousmaf, il n'en peut plus, parce que presque tous les enfants qui ont témoigné volontairement ont été assassinés, sans aucune raison. Alors, est-ce qu'on s'est posé la question, est-ce qu'il y aurait le moyen, comme par exemple quand des gens ont des sources qui témoignent pour le journal, est-ce qu'il y aurait des protections pour éviter que ces enfants soient, ou qu'on puisse inculper ceux qui descendent des enfants qui portent plainte et qui témoignent de ce qu'ils ont encouru, plutôt que de mourir dans les 6 mois ou des fois c'est l'année ou 2 ans après. Mais ils sont presque tous morts, et moi je trouve que maintenant, quand je vois ces films qui sont nécessaires en même temps, je pense que pour que le grand public se rende compte de ce que c'est, mais je trouve insupportable, parce que je me dis, s'il n'est pas mort, dans combien de temps il va être abattu? Parce qu'il est question de ça.
Can we have one more? Just
Last one. Last one. Thank you. Thank you.
Je voudrais repartir sur l'intervention que vient de faire Marie-Pierre, parce que je crois qu'elle a assez rendu ce que nous tous en ce moment on vit après une soirée comme celle qu'on vient de vivre. Et c'est vrai que quelque part, à un moment donné, nous sommes en 2022, j'ai relu votre rapport Amnesty International de 2015, vous dites exactement, je veux dire, les mêmes choses, si ce n'est que la situation encore plus empirée depuis ce moment-là. Alors je finis par me poser la question, mais est-ce que véritablement on veut aller, nous, militants des droits de l'homme, est-ce que véritablement nous voulons aller jusqu'au cœur du sujet, jusque là où il faut remonter pour comprendre véritablement la politique israélienne? C'est du colonialisme de transfert. Nous allons au mois d'août, j'espère que nous serons suffisamment nombreux pour empêcher une telle commémoration. Nous allons de nouveau devoir vivre une commémoration du premier congrès sioniste de Theodor Herzl. Qu'est-ce qu'était ce premier congrès? Ça a été d'entrée de jeu le transfert, la liquidation et la disparition du peuple palestinien. Il n'y a jamais eu d'ambiguïté là-dessus. Or, si à tout moment on se met à parler de plan de paix, ou comme vous le faites actuellement, d'une lutte anti-apartheid, si nous n'allons pas nous-mêmes nous questionner comment a-t-il été possible qu'un tel projet politique soutenu par l'impérialisme anglais, puis aujourd'hui soutenu par l'impérialisme américain, c'est parce que nous partageons, je veux dire, une même culture, c'est-à-dire un pays qui ne peut servir qu'à des intérêts économiques et impérialistes. Reconnaissons-le. L'apartheid est venu ensuite, j'ai envie de dire, l'apartheid, c'est la mise en place d'une sorte d'impossibilité de faire un transfert violent, comme ça a été le cas en 1948. C'est parce qu'Israël a peur qu'il y ait tout d'un coup des caméras qui viennent véritablement filmer, de voir ces gens partir sur les routes parce qu'on les envoie dans d'autres pays arabes. C'est uniquement pour ça qu'on est obligé de mettre en place un système d'apartheid qui fait mourir à petit feu, quand c'est pas dramatiquement, comme c'est le cas pour la jeunesse, qui fait mourir à petit feu une population dont elle a décidé que d'entrée de jeu, elle n'en voulait pas. pas. Et je regrette aussi qu'on n'ait pas eu le temps de parler aussi du racisme qu'il y a envers les Mizraïm, parce qu'eux aussi sont les victimes de cette politique qu'il fallait remplacer des Palestiniens par des gens d'origine juive. Pour quelles raisons ne parle pas non plus de l'état dans lequel on laisse la communauté juive orientale, tout comme on ne parle pas de comment on attaque les Bédouins.
Okay. All right. So, in the interest of time, just to have some closing statements, and if you'd like to speak to the comment that the lady just shared, we'll do 2 minutes each. And Philip, we'll start with you, and then we'll just come down the road. Just 2-minute closing statements, or any pressing things that you want to share before we end this evening.
So I'll try a little bit and address what's been said, but maybe come at it, I don't necessarily have good answers to, the question of then how you can stop, for instance, children being killed in the way we've, just seen or just heard about. But I guess one thing, maybe a couple of things that we haven't talked much about tonight is, I guess, where there might be you could argue a bit of hope. And I'm sure, Anne-Catherine, you were in a moment going to say why you were very pessimistic about the Swiss role. I think if you look beyond Europe and you look beyond North America, there are potentially some interesting initiatives. I mean, take countries that themselves have gone through apartheid, South Africa, Namibia. The governments of those countries are seriously considering undertaking initiative at the United Nations General Assembly to bring back a special committee on apartheid. They are also talking about bringing the question of apartheid in Palestine before the International Court of Justice. I'm not saying that produces some sort of instant solution, but there are countries that are taking this seriously, and they just are not necessarily here or in our immediate vicinity. Secondly, I guess the other thing I wanted to say was, there is, and again, this is not an overnight solution, but we're talking about justice, or the lack of justice, the reality of impunity, of Israeli officials who are committing crimes of apartheid. We are not going to see justice in Israel. We're not going to see it in Israeli courts. That's been proven over the last decades. But there is an investigation that's ongoing at the level of the International Criminal Court. And again, that is not an overnight solution, but it could lead, and not necessarily on apartheid, but at least it could lead to prosecutions for some of the gravest crimes that we've been talking about tonight and we've been witnessing. Now, what can we do? Well, we must be pressuring our governments to ensure that they support that process, because too often they don't. They try and undermine it. So I just end there. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Phil. Anne-Catherine, your closing statement, please. Thank you.
Sur la question de la justice, dans la présentation pour cette soirée, je figure comme une défenseuse de la compétence universelle. C'est vrai que le premier projet de code pénal était vraiment sans limite, comme le juge Garçon a pu faire, a presque obtenu l'extradition de Pinochet en Espagne. Maintenant, ça existe encore dans le code pénal, mais je ne suis pas juriste et je pense qu'on pourrait aussi engager des procès. De plus, le Parlement suisse vient d'adopter une loi sur les sanctions. C'est tout à fait nouveau. Ça veut dire qu'il n'y a pas besoin d'avoir des sanctions internationales ou organisées par l'ONU. Donc, le pouvoir de poser des sanctions. Ça existe aussi. Nous sommes membres du statut de Rome et puis du CPI. Il y a des procédures en cours. Donc voilà, là, c'est quand même une voie. Mais ce que je voudrais dire, pourquoi je suis pessimiste vis-à-vis de la politique suisse, il y a d'abord une première chose qui m'horripile, qui me fâche énormément, c'est que depuis 20 ans que je suis cette affaire au Parlement, le Conseil fédéral continue à parler des Palestiniens et des Israéliens comme presque deux partenaires. du même niveau. Il y a une symétrie constante. Jamais ils n'ont été capables de dire il y a un colonisateur et un oppresseur et des opprimés. Et ça c'est évidemment très grave. Un autre aspect, c'est que la politique suisse est encore, en tout cas le discours politique suisse est complètement irréaliste. On dit encore oui, nous sommes pour une solution à 2 États dans les limites de 67, mais personne ne dit que les choses ont changé et que peut-être il faudrait qu'on change aussi. Et ce qui est malheureusement en train de changer, c'est qu'on a un nouveau ministre des Affaires étrangères, qui est aussi le président de la Confédération, Ignacio Cassis, qui, lui, est en train de pratiquer en sourdine une espèce de comment est-ce qu'il faut dire, de mise à niveau de la politique, avec des décisions catastrophiques, comme de déplacer le bureau de la DDC, donc de l'aide et de la coopération internationale de Jérusalem-Est à Ramallah. Il avait même imaginé que puisqu'il fallait quitter Jérusalem-Est, on pouvait le mettre à Jérusalem-Ouest, ou même à Tel Aviv. Ce qui est vraiment... Enfin bon, finalement... là, il y a du cafouillage à la Confédération. Les uns disent non, on reste. Et ça, c'est vraiment une marque d'une soumission à la politique d'annexion de Jérusalem-Est. Encore juste une chose, si vous permettez. C'est cette politique, justement, qui me rend sceptique, parce que cette normalisation de la situation, elle s'exprime aussi dans un rapport sur la stratégie qui s'appelle MENA, ça veut dire Moyen-Orient, Afrique du Nord. Ça veut dire qu'on va dans le sens d'une réconciliation, voilà, comme ça a été fait aussi par l'Amérique et les États-Unis. Et voilà, on va aussi on va reprendre la question de l'UNRWA parce que ça ne va pas comme ça. Enfin, il y a différents signes qui montrent que, au fond, maintenant, on en a marre. On aimerait bien que ces deux protagonistes, enfin, se mettent autour d'une table et puis qu'ils se mettent d'accord, quoi. Enfin, voilà, c'est un peu ça, cette politique. Et là, moi, ça me rend extrêmement pessimiste.
Thank you, Anne-Catherine. Couple minutes each, Lena.
I'm going to make it very short and sweet and to the point. Miko brought up the Free Palestine and how he did, it's too complicated and it doesn't make sense, the Free Palestine. Is that what you said? Just Free Palestine? No? Did you say that? Anyway, about the Free Palestine movement. One thing that Omar Barghouti said to the head of Boycott, Divestment and Sanction, one thing that he said recently in a lecture he was giving, actually, I think at Harvard or something, Columbia, he said that the biggest problem that the Palestinians have is that they can't see a free Palestine. Recently, I was talking to a very close girlfriend of mine who's German, and she said, free Palestine is too aggressive, Lena. I said, that's really funny, because free Ukraine, everyone's standing up and throwing their dollars into the pot. But what is free Palestine? It's not the free Palestine that pisses anyone off. It's the Palestine. It has nothing to do with the word free. It's the fact that we're using the word Palestine, and we have to continue to use it, because what they're trying to do here is erasure, genocide. They want us to no longer exist. My mother's U.S. passport, she was born in Nazareth, Palestine. Her U.S. passport says she was born nowhere. Because they said, you can have Jordan, you can have Syria, or you can have Lebanon. But you can't have Palestine. She said, but I was born in Palestine. I said, too bad. So that's why we have to free Palestine, because we have to free the Palestinian people, and we have to free that whole narrative that has been changed since probably 1948, if not 1917, that we exist. Palestine existed for 4,000 years, and the Palestinians exist. You can leave us in Israel. We need to be freed in Israel. We need to be freed. We need a free Palestine and free Palestinians. And no one should forget that. We should say it every day until we get there.
So I want to once again agree with Diana about the Palestinian generosity. The Zionists like to say that they made the desert bloom. There's an excellent report, it's actually a book called Palestinian Refugees in International Law. It was co-written by Francesca Albanese, who is now the special rapporteur. It's worth reading. It's a little, maybe it's even a little bit longer than the Amnesty report, but it's worth reading. And one of the things that makes absolutely very, very clear, in a way that is, it's pretty shocking actually, the theft, just the amount of theft that went in, because Palestine, you know, had a rich economy, it was exporting, it had a rich culture, it had a rich history, going back thousands of years as Palestine. Then one day, boom, 15th of May 1948, it became a footnote, and suddenly it was Israel and the Bible. But they stole money from the banks, millions. People had money in the banks. They stole millions of dollars worth of produce, oranges, you know, fruit on the trees, produce in the fields, entire agricultural areas. They stole. Cities, public spaces, buildings, cars, you name it. It was all stolen. It was a country that was in full bloom, that was stolen, and somehow the Zionists managed to convince everybody that this was desert and they made it bloom. 5 minutes before that, Europeans were buying things, were exporting oil, olive oil and soap and oranges and barley from the Palestinian Bedouin in the Naqab to make beer. I mean, it was a thriving country. Suddenly everybody forgot. Dahr al-Omar, your great ancestor, you know, who turned Palestine into an economic superpower in the 18th century, forgotten, gone. You're not going to find, thank God there's now a novel about him by Ibrahim Nasrallah. But you know, the amount of theft, and then the massacres, and even to this day, we're still finding out more about the massacres of 1948. Of 1948, still things are being discovered today. Never mind everything that took place since then. Sabra Shatila and Jenin and on, and Gaza again, and so on and so on and so forth. And now, the Israelis, and by the way, Israelis, we're like the whites in South Africa. Yeah. We're not organically from there, but now there's this thing called white people in South Africa, white South Africans. Well, now there's this thing called Israelis. It's this new thing that now exists in Palestine. They dare to negotiate on this idea of whether or not, you know, they won't even entertain the idea of equal rights, as though it's for them. Who the hell made you the boss of this country? Who allowed you to steal it and appropriate it like this? You know, people say, oh yeah, when you land at Tel Aviv airport, they have these posters that show falafel, you know falafel? Inside the pita bread, with little Israeli flags stuck into it. At Tel Aviv airport, when you're waiting for your luggage. The falafel is not the problem, it's part of the problem in the thobe. They stole the whole country and renamed it. It was Palestine going back 4,000 years, proven, clearly. Suddenly it's Israel and everybody forgot there was a Palestine. What this is telling us is this. First of all, in order to foresee the future of Palestine, we need to understand the past, the glorious, amazing past of Palestine, the richness. We need to understand what's still at risk, because a great deal of Palestine is still there. I mean, they destroyed a lot. They haven't destroyed Al-Aqsa yet, but they will. And there are more Palestinians, like we heard, the Palestinian children we see today alive. The question is, how long are they going to live? You know? And we need to be clear about where we're going with this. There cannot be any compromise on a free, democratic, decolonized, anti-apartheid Palestine. No Israel-Palestine anymore. Wipe that name off, you know, from everything. It's Palestine, it's occupied, and has to be free. All of it. But nothing is going to happen on its own. No one is going to do this. No one is going to stand between the soldier, the sniper, and the next Shirin Abu Akleh. Nobody. We need to get up tomorrow morning and change the world. We need to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. Business as usual has got to stop. Any organization any agency, governmental, non-governmental, that anybody here is a part of, needs to immediately stop all cooperation with Israel. And the demand must come from us. Or we need to take action to make sure that business as usual does not happen. In the last Olympics, there was an Algerian, a Somali judo practitioners who refused to compete. They destroyed their own careers. They cannot compete in their sport anymore. They shouldn't have to do that. The Olympic Committee needs to do that. They shouldn't have to risk their career and their entire life. The Olympic Committee needs to kick out Israel for good until such time as the apartheid regime collapses. FIFA needs to do the same thing. Every university and so on. And any institution, any agency that we're a part of, we need to be there. We are the ones that can stand between the sniper and the next Palestinian child and the next Shireen Abu Akleh. We have to do it. We have to do it tomorrow morning. We can't wait. Now, if we do this, and if we act smart, and we mobilize, and we organize, and we confront our elected officials, and we confront the different agencies that exist, then Palestine can and will be free. A free, democratic, decolonized, post-Zionism Palestine is definitely a possibility if we help the Palestinians. Palestinians in Palestine are spilling blood like water. They're doing everything that they can. We need to do more. And if we do, and when Palestine is free, then we will be able to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we will be able to look at our children and grandchildren and say, you know what? We stood on the right side. I had a small part in liberating Palestine. And that is a huge thing. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will try to be quick. First, I want to thank the translator.
Oh, yes, thank you, translator. That's right.
I came from Palestine. I just arrived from Palestine yesterday. I live in Palestine. From the perspective of Israel and Israelis, they're living the best scenario that they can possibly be living. Allow me to explain. First, there is now, they've contained Palestinians. They've contained us. We live on very little spaces within our historic country, and they've expelled more than 50% of the country living in camps. Second, in Gaza, they've maintained a very, very brutal siege on over 2 million people, 1 million children, by the way. I will keep saying this until my last breath, because it's a siege on children. They're able to kill with impunity. They're able to destroy homes with impunity. They're able to steal land with impunity. They get huge benefits from the United States, billions of dollars, not just the $3 billion. They get more than the $3 billion. And Trump moved the embassy, illegally by the way, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They've closed down the Palestinian mission in the United States. And now, of course, they have these normalization agreements with the Arab world, with the despotic regimes, by the way. This is not the Arab world. I believe in the Arab world. The Arab world does not support Israel, believe me. But these despotic regimes do. So for Israelis, this looks wonderful. They can do whatever they want. They can have their cake and they can eat it too. But, and this is an important but, the depths of Israeli control over Palestinian lives has reached new heights. Shireen Abu Akleh was a friend. She was a friend, and she was somebody who very deeply affected me, as she did so many millions of people. She had a quality to her voice, a quality to her character that touched so many people. And she was able to show the world Palestine. Now, when an Israeli sniper killed her, they didn't just kill the voice of Shireen, they affected many, many, many generations. But the depth and depravity of control that Israel has is that not only do they control our life, but they also wanted to control our mourning and the way that we grieve. And this is why at her funeral, they were insistent upon us not putting the Palestinian flag on her casket, even though she's a martyr. And this is why you saw those images of the Israeli police beating the pallbearers. Look at the depths of depravity, that they beat pallbearers carrying a casket of somebody that they killed. All right? That's the depth of control that they have now. Now, all that said, it looks pretty for Israel, right? They can control, they can do whatever. But there's something that happened during that period that shows to me just how weak Israel is. And what it is they're now trying to pass a law to ban what? Say it with me, the Palestinian flag. They are terrified of these colors, red, black, white, and green. When a country is so terrified of 4 colors, red, black, white, and green, it shows you just the depths of their weakness, not of their strength. We are the ones who are strong. We are the ones that will rise. We are the ones that will soar, and we are the ones that will survive. But the only way that this can be done is with the help of people in this room and beyond this room who believe in our liberation and who believe that it is time for us to be free. And this is why I want to leave you with exactly what Ayman, the woman who's being attacked by the settlers, kept saying. I say it again. They uproot a tree, we plant 1,000. They've uprooted thousands. It's now our job to plant millions. And the only way we can do that is by pushing for Israel to be held accountable. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Everyone, we hope, thank you to all the panelists. We hope this has been an enlightening, as we really enjoyed this. And thank you, Diana, Miko, Lena, and Catherine, and Peter, and for coming with an open heart to have this discussion. Thank you, everyone.